Okay, chapter 1, section 4, this is part 2. We are doing this in a two-part session because the second part of chapter 1, section 4 is fairly difficult. So I really need you guys to pay attention. There's going to be a lot of questions throughout this video on Edpuzzle, and I also need you to take notes. Make sure you write down all of the examples that I show you today. Many of them will be the same examples that you will see on your worksheet. So make sure you follow along and you listen and you write, you pause and rewatch. This video will be a little longer than most of the videos. Okay, solving equations for specific variables. Here are the steps for solving equations for specific variables. And what I mean by that is we're going to solve equations, and in these equations, we're going to have more than one variable, and you're going to have to solve the equation for a different variable. So the first thing we're going to do is identify the variable that we're going to be asked to solve the equation for. Then we're going to get a highlighter. You're going to need a highlighter when you do these problems. It will help you visualize what you need to do. So we're going to highlight the variable in the original equation and highlight it throughout the problem so that we know what we're solving for. And then we're going to decide what needs to be undone to solve that equation. Just like we solve any other equation, we're going to do it the same way, except we're going to be using variables. So let's do an example. So the first one that we're going to look at is P equals IRT. And the reason that this t is in parentheses over here is because this is the variable that we're being asked to solve for. So I'm going to get out my highlighter and say, okay, I have to solve this equation, except I want t to be by itself. Now, if I would give you an equation where it would look like this, and you would be solving for t, all you would do, this is all multiplication, you would just divide by 12 or divide by 3 times 4. So that is the exact same thing that we are going to do when we solve this equation. We are just going to divide by I times R. Since it's attached by multiplication, the opposite of multiplication is division. Now, does anybody know what P divided by I times R is? No, you don't. And since we don't know, that's what we leave it as. We don't simplify that if you can't. That's what you leave it as. So what I'm left with, I divided by I cancels or is 1. R divided by R is 1. So what we're left with is P divided by I times R equals T. So what we just did was we solved that same equation for the variable T. Let's try another one. So in this case, we're going to solve this equation for the variable x. So get out your highlighter and go ahead and highlight the variable x. Now, in a normal equation, assuming everything else is just a number, if you remember the rules of solving an equation, we always have to get rid of subtraction and addition first. Remember, we're doing SAD-MEP, which is PEMDAS backwards, so we're getting rid of subtraction and addition first. In this case, we have a minus 6. So we're going to add 6 to both sides. And does anybody know what y plus 6 is? No, they're not like terms. You cannot combine them. So we just leave it y plus 6, just like that. And this side's going to cancel out. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. So we have y plus 6 equals 5x. Go ahead and highlight your x because it's not by itself yet. But we did get rid of the subtraction and addition. So how do I get rid of the 5? How is it attached to the x? It's attached by multiplication. So in order to get rid of it, or in order to simplify it, we're going to divide both sides by 5. Now, since we don't know what y plus 6 is, we're going to have to divide the entire value by 5. We're going to go ahead and cancel that out. And what I'm left with is y plus 6 over 5 equals x. Now, something you need to make sure and note, especially on Math Excel or on your worksheets, sometimes the answers will not be written like this. What you'll have to do is use the distributive property and distribute that 5 into each term. So I had y divided by 5 plus 6 divided by 5 equals x. These are both similar or correct answers, just written differently. So if you're doing a multiple choice test or if you're doing a worksheet and you don't see the answer that you have on your paper, see if it can be simplified different into an equivalent form. Next one. It's kind of blurry. I apologize about that. So this one, I have x plus y equals 5 divided by, or x plus y divided by 3 equals 5. And this one we're solving for x, which is right here. There we go. So most of the time when you're solving equations, we want to get rid of subtraction and addition first, which all the time we do. However, we can't get rid of the plus y first here because if you remember back in one of the first videos that I taught, this line assumes parentheses on the top and the bottom. And remember in SADMEP, the p at the end, that's the last thing we're going to eliminate. So let's go ahead and multiply both sides by 3 since the opposite of division is multiplication. These are going to cancel, and what I'm left with is x plus y equals 5 times 3 is 15. Now, we're still solving for the variable x. We do not have it by itself yet. However, since we got rid of the division, we now can get rid of the parentheses. There's nothing on the outside of those parentheses to eliminate. So we have plus y. What is the opposite of addition? Subtraction. So we're going to subtract y from both sides. Now, we were able to multiply 5 times 3 because everybody here knows that 5 times 3, or hopefully you learned previously, 5 times 3 is 15. And if you're not sure, use a calculator. But nobody knows if you have 15 and you subtract y, we don't know what the answer to that is. So we're just going to leave it 15 minus y equals x. And there's our answer, and we know that we can't simplify that any other way. All right, the next one, ax plus by equals c. In this one, we are solving for the variable y. Okay, that's the variable that's in parentheses that we're solving for. Now, this is a little bit tricky because I have to get rid of addition and subtraction first. We don't have any parentheses, and we do have an addition sign. But what am I subtracting? Well, since the only thing we can assume to be a variable, we want to get the y by itself. This a times x is exactly that. It's just a number. So we're just going to subtract that entire thing from both sides. And I'm left with by equals, and nobody can calculate c minus ax unless you know the values of the variables. So I'm just going to leave it c minus a times x. And I'm still solving for the variable y, so go ahead and get your highlighter out. Highlight y and think to yourself, okay, how do I get that y by itself? How is it attached? How is the b attached? Well, multiplication. So we're going to divide both sides by b. Now be careful. You have to divide the entire side by b. Make sure you don't just divide c by b or the a by b or the x by b, the entire part. So I have y equals c minus ax over b. Let's say you look at Math Excel at the multiple choice and you're like, none of the answers look like mine. Remember, this b can be distributed. I can have y equals c divided by b minus ax divided by b. Either one works. V equals L times W times H. We're solving this for the letter L. How are W and H attached to L? Well, it's L times W times H. The opposite of multiplication is division. And since I'm getting rid of W and H, go ahead and just divide both sides by W and H. So I have V over W times H equals L. And since L is by itself, that's as far as we go. V equals pi r squared h. I'm solving this for the variable h. Get your highlighter out, highlight h. How are pi and r squared attached to just the h? Ignore the squared because r squared is not what we're solving for. We're solving for h. And if you look, these are all attached by multiplication. Okay, the squared is not attached to the h, it's attached to the r. So all we're going to do is use that multiplication and think the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide both sides by that whole entire thing, just by pi r squared. Pi divided by pi cancels, r squared divided by r squared cancels, and I'm just left with h. So I have v over pi r squared. We're solving this one for y. This is very similar to one of the ones we did earlier. We're going to go ahead and practice this again. Now, if you remember, normally I get rid of subtraction and addition first unless it's stuck inside parentheses. You may not see parentheses here. However, that division line implies everything on the top. So I have to get rid of my division first, my divided by 2, and then my parentheses can be eliminated. So we're going to go ahead and multiply both sides by 2. So I have 2 times a, or just 2a, equals, 2's are going to cancel on this side, x plus y. We're solving for, y. How is x attached to y? This time it's addition, so we're going to go ahead and subtract x from both sides. And since 2a and x are not like terms, we actually can't subtract them, so we're just going to write down 2a minus x equals y. All right, we're solving this one for z. You can do this one a couple different ways. We'll do it the way we have been doing it, just to make it a little easier. So first thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 6. Oh, I have to highlight my z first. That's what I was doing. Multiply both sides by 6. So I have 6x equals, the 6's cancel, y times z. Still solving this for z. How is y attached to z? By multiplication. So opposite of multiplication is division. We're going to divide both sides by y. I have 6x over y equals z. Okay? Now you may see this written differently. Excuse me. You may see it written 6 over y times x equals z. That's the same thing. Just be careful when you solve something like this. If you're looking at a multiple choice, it could be written differently. All right, we're going to solve this one for L. Now, this one is different. You have to be very careful with this one because the L is in the denominator. Let me say that again. The L is in the denominator. You cannot just multiply both sides by R and get 2L by itself because it's in the denominator. It's not in the numerator. If you remember, denominator is the bottom of a fraction or the bottom of the division problem. So when I multiply this by 2L, what happens is this 2L cancels, and now L, 2AL, I'm going to put that in order, is on the other side, which is fine. We just now have to get rid of 2A. Okay, we have to get rid of 2A. So how is 2 and A attached to L? By multiplication, so we're going to divide both sides by 2 times A. So this is actually a two-step problem since the L is in the denominator. All right, fractions. We're solving this one for F. Don't let this confuse you. Okay, how to get rid of a fraction. We have not talked about this yet, so listen closely. You may have done this in Algebra 1 or in geometry, but listen closely. In order to eliminate a fraction, or in other words, in order to move it to the other side, or however you want to say it, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Reciprocal just means the opposite. So in this case, we have 5/9. So we're going to flip it, put the numerator on the top or the bottom, put the denominator on the top, which is 9/5. So I'm going to multiply both sides of this equation by 9/5. And here's why I can do that. Now just watch this on the side. You need to pay attention. This should be a review, but I'm just going to go ahead and show you. If you multiply this, if you remember how you multiply fractions, you multiply the numerators over the denominators. So this would be 45 over 45. Well, what is 45 divided by 45? 1, which is exactly what we want because 5/9 here times 9/5 here is just going to be 1. So I have 1 times f minus 32, so those eliminate, or they simplify to 1. So I'm left with f minus 32 equals 9/5 times c. Still solving for f. I still have one more thing to eliminate, the minus 32. So we're going to add 32 to both sides. Now nobody can add 9/5 c plus 32 because they are not like terms. They are not the same. So we're just going to have 9/5 c plus 32 equals f. We're going to solve this one for b. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the divided by 3 first because we assume everything on the top is in parentheses. So multiply both sides by 3. A plus B plus C. Now I need to subtract A and C. You cannot subtract AC. You have to subtract A and subtract C. So minus A minus C on this side. A minus A cancels, C minus C cancels. So this side I have 3 capital A minus little a. Capital A and little a are not, or lowercase a, are not the same. Okay, so be careful. You cannot combine those. You have to have capital A, lowercase a, and it looks like that. I think we're about out of examples. Nope, we have one more. This one, I'm solving for z. Okay, I'm going to take this one and I'm going to get rid of my 4 first because I have to assume everything on the top is in parentheses. So I have 4x equals, these 4 cancel. So I have 2y minus z. Still solving this for z. Now, this is tricky. Be careful. I have to get rid of 2y, and it's attached by subtraction. However, 2y is positive. If you add 2y to 2y, you're going to get 4y. What you have to look at is the sign in front of the 2y. Okay? So since it's a positive, I'm going to go ahead and subtract. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2y from both sides. And what you're left with is negative z. Okay? 4x minus 2y, those are not like terms. Do not combine them. Now, how do I get rid of a negative? I talked about this earlier in one of my videos. Let's see if you can remember. We're going to multiply both sides of those by negative 1. Multiply by negative 1. Negative z times negative 1 gives me z. And then go ahead and distribute this to the entire thing, and I'm left with negative 4x plus 2y, yeah, because negative 1 times negative 2y is a positive, equals z, and now your z is by itself. Okay, this topic is a little bit more difficult than the ones we've done in the past, so make sure you take your time. This video is a lot longer than the ones we've done in the past. If you have questions, make sure you stop in and see me.